A wealthy man brought the woman who worked quietly in his home to his former partner's wedding. No one noticed her at first. No one thought she mattered. But by the end of the night, everything she did would leave the entire room stunned. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Before we begin today's story, I have one small request. Please take a moment to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our latest videos. It's quick, it's free, and it's the best way to support us in continuing to bring you powerful, dramatic stories like this one. The man everyone in the city feared walked into his own house that evening, already knowing he was about to break a rule he had never broken before. And the woman who would change everything didn't realize it yet, because she was standing at the end of a service hallway, invisible as always, waiting to be told what to clean next. Welcome back to Untold Journey Stories. Boston was wrapped in a dull winter sky that afternoon, the kind that pressed down on the city and made even glass towers feel heavy. Inside the Hawthorne residence, the air was silent in a way that only old money houses could manage. No wasted footsteps, no raised voices. Everything moved with discipline, precision, and quiet power. Lena Brooks stood near the service corridor with her hands folded in front of her uniform, her posture careful, her presence deliberately small. For nearly 7 months, this house had been her world. Marble floors she scrubbed until they reflected chandeliers she would never look up at for too long. Tables set for guests whose names she was not meant to remember. Conversations she overheard only in fragments before disappearing again. To the outside world, Victor Hawthorne was a name spoken with caution. A private investor, a strategist, a man whose influence moved quietly behind closed doors. He was not loud. He did not posture. He simply decided, and things happened. To Lena, he was Mr. Hawthorne, her employer, distant, controlled, unreadable. She had learned his rules quickly: speak only when spoken to, never linger, never assume familiarity. Her job was not to be noticed, and she was very good at it. Being invisible had kept her employed longer than any reference ever could. That afternoon, though, something felt wrong. The house was too quiet. Even the senior staff moved as if they were holding their breath. Earlier in the kitchen, Lena had caught pieces of conversation she wasn't meant to hear. A wedding, cameras, a family name that carried weight in places she would never step into. She told herself not to think about it. Thinking was dangerous. Thinking led to questions, and questions led to mistakes. She had rent due. Her father's prescriptions were already late this month. Stability mattered more than curiosity. Then she heard her name. Lena. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. She turned. Victor Hawthorne stood beneath the warm glow of the hallway lights, his suit flawless, his expression composed in the way it always was. There was no urgency in his posture, no visible emotion. And yet, something about the way he looked at her made her chest tighten. "Yes, sir?" she asked quietly. For a brief moment, he did not speak. He studied her as if confirming a decision already made long before this second. Lena felt exposed in a way she had never felt before, as though the careful invisibility she had built around herself had slipped. "I need you to accompany me to an event this weekend," he said. The words landed wrong. Not harshly, just wrong. "I'm sorry, sir?" she asked. "An event?" "A wedding," he replied. Lena felt the ground shift beneath her feet, though she couldn't yet explain why. Weddings belonged to another world, a world of introductions and judgments and questions she did not know how to answer. She hesitated. "You mean as staff?" "No." The answer was immediate. "Not as staff," he said again. "You will attend as my guest." In that instant, everything Lena believed about her place in this house fractured. Her mind raced, searching for logic, for a reason that made sense. Her, standing beside him, in a room filled with people who could dismantle her with a glance. "I don't understand," she said honestly. "Why would you choose me?" Victor's jaw tightened just enough to reveal something beneath the surface. Not anger, not doubt, resolve. "Because I need someone who won't perform for them," he said. "Someone they cannot manipulate. Someone who has no interest in their games." Lena swallowed. She had never been chosen for anything in her life. Not like this. Before she could respond, he added, "Think of it as a temporary arrangement." An arrangement. A role. A line she was being asked to cross without knowing what waited on the other side. She nodded slowly. unaware that this single decision would pull her into a room designed to judge, expose, and break people who did not belong. And she had no idea that by the end of that night, the room would never see her the same way again. If you want to know what happens when a woman the world ignores refuses to shrink, make sure you subscribe to Untold Journey Stories and turn on notifications. Your support gives us the motivation to keep bringing you stories like this. Before we continue, here's a question for you. If you were Lena, would you have said yes? A yes, even knowing you would be judged. B, no, some worlds are too dangerous to enter. Comment A or B below. That single word, yes, did not echo in the hallway, but it followed Lena long after Victor Hawthorne had walked away, settling into her thoughts like a question she could no longer avoid. She finished the rest of her shift on instinct alone. Her hands moved, her body followed routine, but her mind stayed fixed on the moment he had looked at her, not as staff, not as background, but as someone he had selected. The idea unsettled her more than fear ever could. Fear, at least, was familiar. This was not. Late that evening, as the house settled into its night rhythm, Lena was called to Victor's study. The room was everything she expected. Dark wood, clean lines, no personal clutter, power without decoration. He stood by the window, looking out over the city lights as if measuring distances only he could see. "You may be wondering why I asked you," he said without turning. She did not pretend otherwise. "Yes, sir." He faced her then, his expression steady, his voice precise. "This wedding is not a celebration. It is a performance, one designed to remind certain people of where they believe they stand." "And where do you stand?" Lena asked before she could stop herself. The corner of his mouth tightened slightly. Not amusement, recognition. "I stand outside of it," he said, "but I will not pretend that history disappears simply because time passes." He explained only what was necessary. The family hosting the wedding had once been closely tied to his own. Alliances had fractured, loyalties had shifted. Invitations had been extended not out of warmth, but calculation. Appearances mattered to them. Reactions mattered even more. "They expect me to arrive alone," he continued. "Or not at all." Lena understood then. She was not there to decorate his arm. She was there to disrupt an expectation. "You could bring anyone," she said carefully. "Someone who belongs in that world." "That is precisely why I won't," Victor replied. "They know how to handle people like themselves. They do not know what to do with someone who refuses to play along." She felt the weight of his words settle between them. "And if they target me, they will," he said plainly, "but not because of you, because of what you represent." She thought of her quiet routines, her careful invisibility, the way she had survived by avoiding attention. "I've never been good at confrontation." "You won't need to confront anyone," Victor said. "You only need to remain exactly as you are." There was something unsettling about that, something honest. "This is not charity," he added, as if anticipating her doubt. "Nor is it a test. It is a role with boundaries. You will not be questioned without my consent. You will not be corrected. And you will not be diminished." "And after the wedding?" she asked. He did not answer immediately. When he did, his voice was even. "Afterward, you return to your position here. Nothing else is expected." Nothing else. The words were clean, almost clinical, yet Lena sensed they were not as final as he intended them to be. She nodded, accepting the terms, not because they felt safe, but because something inside her refused to retreat. Victor stepped aside, signaling the conversation was over. As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her once more. "Lena," he said, "what they see when you walk into that room will unsettle them. Do not mistake their discomfort for your failure." She left the study with her pulse steady and her thoughts racing, fully aware that she had agreed to step into a world built to judge people like her. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't sure she wanted to disappear from it. What Victor said followed Lena into the days that came next, not as a warning, but as a quiet pressure she could not release. The house did not change its routines, yet everything felt altered to her. She still rose before dawn, still moved through corridors with practiced care, still kept her eyes lowered when passing rooms not meant for her. But now there was an awareness beneath every movement, as if she were standing on the edge of something unseen. She had agreed to step into a space that would not forgive mistakes, and the waiting itself became its own form of tension. The staff noticed it too, though no one spoke openly at first. Conversation softened when she entered a room. Eyes lingered just a moment longer. By the second morning, Margaret Klein found her in the linen room, folding crisp white cloth with hands that moved more slowly than usual. "They won't make it easy for you," Margaret said quietly. Without preamble, Lena did not look up. "I'm not expecting them to." Margaret paused, studying her. "You understand that in places like that, cruelty rarely arrives loudly. It comes dressed as politeness." "I know," Lena replied. "I've seen enough of it from a distance." Margaret nodded once. "Then remember this. You don't owe them explanations. Not about where you come from. Not about why you're there." Later that afternoon, Lena was escorted to a smaller sitting room she had never entered before. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, muted by heavy drapes. A woman stood waiting inside, calm and composed, her presence deliberate rather than commanding. "My name is Claire Whitman," she said. "I've been asked to prepare you for the weekend." Claire did not rush. She did not overwhelm. She asked questions instead. How Lena moved, what made her uncomfortable, what she refused to wear. She listened more than she spoke, as if she were shaping something by subtraction rather than addition. "This isn't about transformation," Claire said, setting aside a garment Lena immediately knew would not be chosen. "It's about clarity. You don't need excess. Excess invites scrutiny." The dress she selected was simple in structure, dark and restrained, cut to allow movement without display. When Lena stepped in front of the mirror later, she felt something unfamiliar rise in her chest. It wasn't pride. It was recognition. She did not look like someone pretending to belong. She looked like someone who refused to apologize for existing. That evening, as Lena returned to her quarters, she crossed paths with Victor in the main hall. He stopped when he saw the garment bag in her hands, his gaze assessing without intrusion. "That will serve its purpose," he said. "What purpose is that?" she asked. "To make them uncertain," he replied. "People who are certain of themselves are dangerous to those who rely on hierarchy." She hesitated, then asked the question she had been holding back. "And if I fail?" Victor did not answer immediately. When he did, his voice was steady. "Then you will fail by remaining yourself. That is not a failure I will correct." That night, Lena lay awake listening to the quiet hum of the house. She thought of the rooms she cleaned and the lives that passed through them, untouched by her presence. She thought of the way people like her were spoken about, rarely too, and never with curiosity. She realized then that preparation was not about learning how to stand or what to say. It was about learning how not to retreat. The morning before the wedding arrived colder than the days before it. Frost edged the windows. Lena dressed slowly, aware of every choice she made, every breath she took. When she stepped into the entrance hall, staff members paused without meaning to, not in awe, in acknowledgement. Victor waited near the staircase, adjusting his cuff with precise movements. When he turned and saw her, something in his posture shifted, subtle but undeniable. "You're ready," he said. Lena nodded. She did not feel fearless. She felt steady. And for the first time, that felt like enough. Steadiness was what Lena carried with her as the car passed through the iron gates, even as the world on the other side prepared to test whether it would crack. The Caldwell estate unfolded in careful symmetry. Lawns trimmed to perfection, white canopies stretched like deliberate declarations of wealth, crystal fixtures catching the pale winter light. The air smelled faintly of roses brought in from somewhere warmer, a detail meant to impress, to remind every guest that comfort here was manufactured on command. As the car came to a stop, the low murmur of conversation drifted across the grounds, polished voices moving easily among polished people. The moment Lena stepped out, that murmur shifted. Not louder, quieter. She felt it before she saw it, the collective pause that rippled outward as eyes turned, first curious, then calculating. Victor moved beside her without urgency, offering his arm as if this were the most natural thing in the world. She took it, her grip light, her posture unchanged. Together they walked forward. Whispers followed them like a current. Questions formed without being spoken. Who is she? Why her? How long will this last? Lena did not meet the stares, but she did not avoid them either. She kept her gaze level, her steps measured, refusing the instinct to shrink. Isabel Caldwell noticed them near the edge of the lawn. She stood apart from a small group, her silver gown catching the light with practiced elegance. When she turned, her smile arrived on time but not entirely intact. It held, though, as she approached. "Victor," she said warmly, "I wasn't sure you would come." "You sent an invitation," he replied, his tone neutral. Her attention shifted to Lena, lingering a fraction longer than politeness required. "And you've brought company." "My guest," Victor said. The word landed cleanly. Guest. No qualifier. No explanation. Isabel's eyes narrowed by a degree almost too small to register. "How unexpected," she said lightly. "I hope you're enjoying yourself." "We've only just arrived," Victor replied. She nodded, already stepping back, her composure restored. "Then welcome. Please enjoy the ceremony." As she moved away, the space she left behind felt colder. Lena exhaled slowly, not in relief, but in readiness. This was only the beginning. They continued through the crowd, each step drawing fresh attention. A few guests offered polite greetings to Victor, their smiles tightening as their eyes drifted to Lena. Others were less careful. A woman in a navy dress leaned toward her companion, whispering just loudly enough to be heard. A man with an overly confident grin glanced at Lena as though assessing merchandise. One of them finally spoke. "You must be new," he said, his tone friendly in the way that disguised intrusion. "What is your background?" Lena felt the question brush against her like cold air. She turned slightly toward Victor, as they had agreed. "That isn't a conversation you're invited into," Victor said calmly. The man blinked, surprised, then laughed it off as if nothing had happened. But the message had landed. They reached the seating area reserved for close acquaintances, the white chairs aligned with mathematical precision. As Lena took her place beside Victor, she became acutely aware of the way the crowd oriented itself around them, conversations bending, attention flickering back again and again. She did not speak. She did not need to. Her presence was already louder than words. From her seat, she noticed Isabel again, further down the aisle now, greeting guests with flawless ease. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Isabel's smile did not falter, but something behind it tightened, as if she were reassessing a calculation that no longer balanced. The ceremony had not yet begun, but the atmosphere had already sharpened. Lena could feel it, the tension building not toward celebration, but toward confrontation. This was a room accustomed to hierarchy, to quick judgments and unspoken rules, and she had entered without offering them any of the signals they relied on. Victor leaned slightly toward her. "They don't know what to do with you," he said quietly. Lena kept her gaze forward. "I'm not here to be understood." A faint pause, then a trace of approval crossed his expression. "Good." As the music began to swell and guests took their seats, Lena felt the weight of the moment settle fully. This was not simply an entrance. It was a declaration, whether anyone had intended it to be or not. And the room was already beginning to respond. The tension that had been quietly tightening since their arrival finally found its moment once the ceremony ended and the crowd began to move again. Applause faded, chairs shifted, and conversation returned in careful waves as guests flowed toward the reception area. The music softened into something elegant and unthreatening, but the air carried a sharper edge now, as if everyone sensed that the most important exchange of the evening had not yet happened. Lena rose with Victor and followed him into the glow of the reception hall, where crystal chandeliers scattered light across polished floors and perfectly arranged tables. At first, the attention came disguised as courtesy. A few guests approached Victor with measured smiles, their words polished, their eyes drifting repeatedly toward Lena. Compliments were offered that were not meant to land. Questions were asked that were not meant to be answered. "You must find this world fascinating," a woman remarked lightly, her tone implying novelty rather than welcome. Lena met her gaze calmly. "Every world reveals itself eventually." The woman blinked, unsure whether she had been dismissed or invited to think, and moved on. Others were less restrained. A pair of guests laughed softly behind their glasses as Lena passed, their amusement sharpened by assumption. She felt it in the tightening of her shoulders, in the familiar urge to make herself smaller, quieter, easier to ignore. She resisted it, not out of defiance, but out of exhaustion. She was tired of retreating. Victor noticed the shift immediately. His posture remained relaxed, but his attention sharpened, his presence subtly repositioning itself closer to hers. Then Isabel Caldwell appeared. She stood near the head table, a crystal glass raised delicately in her hand, her smile flawless as the room gradually quieted. The clink of glass against glass rang out, drawing every gaze toward her. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she said warmly. "It means so much to share this moment with so many familiar faces." Her eyes moved through the room with practiced ease, then settled, deliberately, on Victor and Lena. "And of course," she continued, her voice smooth, "it's always interesting to see unexpected guests join us on such personal occasions." A hush spread outward, subtle but unmistakable. Lena felt the weight of it settle on her skin. This was not curiosity now. This was invitation. Isabel's smile widened just enough to sharpen. "It takes courage to step into a room like this," she added, "especially when one is new to our world." The words were gentle. The intent was not. Lena felt the moment stretch, every instinct urging her to remain silent, to let Victor intervene as he had before. She sensed him shift beside her, prepared to speak, but something inside her settled instead of shrinking. She stepped forward. Her voice, when she spoke, did not rise. It did not tremble. It carried the calm of someone who had nothing to prove. "I think," Lena said evenly, "that every person here has stepped into a new world at some point in their life." The room remained still. "Some of us remember what that felt like," she continued. "Others forget. But unfamiliarity doesn't diminish worth. It reveals it." Isabel's smile faltered, just slightly, not enough for denial, enough for recognition. Lena held her gaze, not confrontational, not apologetic, simply present. "This evening is about beginnings," Lena said, "and beginnings are rarely comfortable for anyone." Silence followed, not the awkward kind, the reflective kind, the kind that arrives when something undeniable has been said. Isabel lowered her glass a fraction, her expression recalibrating. She nodded once, the gesture stiff but controlled. "Well said," she replied, though the words carried less authority than before. Conversation resumed slowly, cautiously, as if the room itself needed time to adjust. People shifted. Some looked away. Others looked at Lena anew, with something closer to respect than judgment. Victor turned toward her, his voice low. "You didn't need me to speak." "I know," Lena replied quietly. For the first time that evening, the balance of the room had changed, and it had not changed because of who stood beside Lena, but because she had chosen, at last, not to step back. What Lena said did not echo loudly through the hall, but it lingered long after the music resumed, reshaping the way the room breathed around her. The reception continued, yet it felt altered, as if an invisible line had been crossed. Conversations restarted with softer edges. Guests who had once watched Lena with curiosity now approached her with a different caution, choosing their words more carefully, measuring their tone. She noticed it in the pauses before questions, in the way eyes no longer skimmed past her, but stopped briefly with acknowledgement. She remained composed, responding politely, never offering more than was asked. Not because she feared saying the wrong thing, but because she no longer felt the need to explain herself. The effort of being seen had given way to something steadier. Acceptance, not from the room, but from herself. Victor stayed close, though not possessively. He observed the subtle shift with quiet attention, his presence no longer a shield but a parallel force. At one point, he leaned toward her slightly. "That wasn't restraint," he said softly. "That was clarity." Lena lowered her gaze for a moment. "I didn't intend to challenge anyone." "You didn't," Victor replied. "You reminded them." When the music slowed and the crowd drifted toward smaller conversations, Victor gestured toward the terrace doors. "Would you like some air?" She nodded, grateful for the invitation. Outside, the cold was immediate, sharp enough to clear lingering tension. Snow had begun to fall, fine and deliberate, settling over the gardens and softening the rigid lines of the estate. The sounds from inside faded into a distant hum, leaving only the quiet rhythm of breath and falling snow. They stood side by side without speaking at first. "You should know," Victor said eventually, "that tonight was never meant to be about provocation." Lena turned toward him. "Then why did you bring me?" He met her gaze fully now, his expression stripped of calculation. "Because I trusted you to remain genuine when everyone else would perform. I underestimated what that would reveal." She felt the weight of his honesty settle between them. "You didn't need me to prove anything," she said. No, Victor agreed. I needed to be reminded. She waited. That dignity doesn't come from position, he continued. And that respect once lost cannot be reclaimed through control. The words were measured, but they carried something new beneath them. Vulnerability, perhaps, or recognition. Before Lena could respond, the terrace doors opened behind them. Isabel stepped outside, her posture immaculate, her expression carefully neutral. I wanted to say, she began, that my remarks earlier were misplaced. Her gaze flicked briefly toward Lena. You handled yourself with composure. Lena inclined her head. Thank you. Isabel nodded once, her pride intact but adjusted. Enjoy the rest of the evening. Then she turned and disappeared back inside, the sound of her heels sharp against the stone. Silence returned. Victor exhaled slowly. That conversation has been waiting to happen for years. Lena looked at him, surprised. You didn't need to defend me. I did, he said simply. Not because you were unable to speak, because choosing where to stand still matters. He offered his arm again, the gesture familiar yet changed. There was no implication now of arrangement or necessity, only choice. Lena accepted, not out of obligation, but with quiet certainty. As they stepped back into the warmth of the reception hall, she understood something clearly for the first time. She had not entered that room to borrow someone else's power. She had entered it carrying her own, and nothing, not even the weight of old expectations, could take that from her. The choice lingered with them as the night drew toward its quiet conclusion, not announced, not explained, simply present in the way they moved together through the final moments of the reception. The hall had softened. Laughter no longer carried an edge. Conversations flowed without the careful posturing that had defined the evening's beginning. Guests who passed Lena now offered measured nods, restrained smiles, acknowledgments that came without questions. The shift was subtle, but it was complete. She was no longer the curiosity woven into whispered speculation. She had become part of the room's accepted reality. Lena felt the fatigue settle in then, not as weakness, but as release. The effort of standing firm, of remaining open in a space designed to close ranks, had required more of her than she realized. She stood near the tall windows, watching snow gather on the edges of the garden lights, each flake dissolving into another, until the ground below softened into something quieter than it had been all evening. Victor joined her without speaking at first. He followed her gaze outward, his posture no longer guarded, his expression reflective. They'll talk about tonight, he said finally. Not in the way they expected. Lena considered that. I don't mind if they do. He glanced at her. You didn't come here to be remembered. No, she said. I came because I said yes. That answer stayed with him. He nodded once as if confirming something privately. As the staff began discreetly clearing tables and the music faded into silence, Victor signaled that it was time to leave. They moved toward the entrance together, unhurried. At the door, Lena paused, taking one last look at the room that had once felt impossibly distant. It no longer intimidated her. It no longer defined her. Outside, the cold wrapped around them again, sharp and honest. The driver opened the car door, but neither of them entered immediately. You know, Victor said, his voice lower now, this was supposed to end tonight. Lena met his gaze. And does it? He did not answer right away. When he did, it was without certainty, but without retreat. Some arrangements do, some moments don't. She accepted that. She had not come seeking promises. What mattered was that something real had shifted, something that could not be undone by morning routines or unspoken rules. As the car pulled away from the estate, Lena watched the lights recede, feeling neither triumph nor regret. What she felt was steadiness, the kind that did not need witnesses. Back at the Hawthorne residence, the house greeted them with its familiar quiet. Lena stepped inside, the echo of her heels softer now, less cautious. Victor stopped near the base of the staircase. Thank you, he said. For the evening? She asked. For the reminder, he replied. She nodded, understanding more than the words alone conveyed. When Lena finally returned to her room, she sat on the edge of the bed and let the silence settle around her. Tomorrow, she would wake early. She would resume her duties. The world would look much the same. But she knew better. She had not borrowed confidence that night. She had discovered it, and once discovered, it did not disappear simply because the lights dimmed. Some doors close quietly behind you, others open inward. Lena lay back and allowed her time to imagine what might happen if she chose again not to step back. What Lena experienced that night was not a transformation in status, wealth, or circumstance. It was something quieter and far more enduring. She did not leave the wedding with a new title, a promise, or public applause. What she left with was clarity. Clarity about who she was, what she would no longer tolerate, and how little permission she actually needed to stand fully in herself. The power of that evening did not come confrontation, but from restraint. Lena never raised her voice. She never explained her worth. She never tried to prove that she belonged. Instead, she remained present, grounded, and honest in a room that relied on insecurity and hierarchy to maintain control. And that alone was enough to shift the balance. The deeper lesson here is simple, but not easy. Dignity is not granted by recognition. It is practiced in moments when it would be easier to retreat. Many people spend their lives waiting to feel ready, waiting to feel validated, waiting for someone else to confirm that they deserve a seat at the table. But the truth is, confidence does not arrive first. Choice does. You may not control how others see you, but you always control how you show up. You do not need to dominate a room to change it. You only need to stop shrinking inside it. Whether at work, in relationships, or in unfamiliar spaces that make you doubt yourself, the most powerful statement you can make is consistency, calm, presence, self-respect. Applying this to everyday life means learning when silence is strength and when it is avoidance. It means setting boundaries without apology. It means trusting that your value does not disappear simply because someone else fails to recognize it. So here is a simple question for you. In moments where you feel judged or underestimated, do you usually step back or do you stay grounded and present? Please share your thoughts respectfully in the comments so others can learn from different perspectives. And if stories like this resonate with you, don't forget to subscribe to Untold Journey Stories. Your support helps us continue creating meaningful stories that remind us all of our quiet strength.